Okay, so this is a good start because I wanted the talk to be very interactive, which it's already started out as, so that's awesome. So, yeah, as Cornelia mentioned, in 2012, we published the first version of this spawn model in Science. And it was basically an attempt to demonstrate how you can take a lot of the methods that were sort of developed in the lab and put them all together to try to build something at a very big scale, right, compared to anything else that we had done. And we sort of came up with the idea of when I was in the process of writing this book, I kind of wrote about all the methods, and I'm like, it's not going to be that interesting if I don't show how you can build something by like bringing all these methods together. So the point of Spawn has always been to build large-scale brain models. That first one, came out now 12 years ago, 13 years ago. We did build a Spawn 2.0, which I'll show you some examples from. And what we've done basically as of January, started building the third version. So so we sort of set a goal for ourselves to have something that's pretty much functional and kind of doing all the major things that we want it to do by Christmas, right? So we're about halfway there right now. So what I'm going to show you is definitely a work in progress. And the thing that I'm really interested in, and the reason I want this to kind of be a discussion or for you to be thinking about like questions or ways to make what I'm going to show you better, is because we're at a position where we can do that right now, right? So we're still picking what components we're going to include, how we're going to include them, and how much detail we're going to put in each of them. And so I'll give you essentially one example of an experiment that we've implemented in the new version of Spawn, and another sort of hint, which you've actually already seen if you saw Varun's talk, about how we want to include language models potentially in this large-scale brain model. Right, so without further ado, what we're really interested in the lab are models of what we like to call biological cognition. So every 6 years or so, we put together a new model. And so students in the lab come, I let them essentially work on whatever part of the brain or whatever type of function that they're really interested in, be it motor control, decision-making, path planning, what have you. And then try to take all of the things that have happened over the last 5 to 6 years and integrate them in the way that we did in the very first Spawn model. And of course, the purpose is to ideally build something that's greater than the sum of its parts, right? So if you have a really nice model that does path integration extremely well and maps onto a bunch of hippocampal data, that's cool. But it'd be even cooler if you had that in a robot body that was moving around in an environment and trying to solve a cognitive task where it needed to be able to do things like navigate in order to solve a cognitive task. Because of course, that's much more like what biological creatures are up to. So Spawn 1 and 2 came out about 6 years apart. And the sort of theoretical advancements that we've made since Spawn 2.0 are understandable in terms of introducing continuous representations.
If you want people to have a legacy, point with the mouse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying the thing that's on the thing. Right. So, the recent developments are really focusing on continuous representations. So I'll try this out. So one of these is basically continuous representation over space, right? And so Nicole gave a talk where, actually, I didn't ask you exactly what you spoke about, but I assume you spoke about spatial representations, sort of vector representations of continuous space and binding and maps and so on. Then we also developed some methods for representing continuous time. So this was in the form of what we call the Legendre memory unit. It's now more commonly called state space models in deep learning, right? Where you basically have introduced a dynamical system into the system that you're building. And Michael Furlong has also done a lot of work, which I don't think he's talked about here yet, on how you can use some of these representations to also represent uncertainty. So those are the kinds of things that we'd like to introduce into the next version of Spawn. And today what I'm going to talk about is giving you a very brief overview of some of these methods. I understand that Terry gave a nice long talk on the neural engineering framework technique, so that's great. I will briefly mention the semantic pointer architecture techniques, which is sort of introduced in that book, How to Build a Brain book. And this is basically all by way of just sort of giving you the vibe of the types of models that we build to help you understand like what we're trying to do in Spawn 3. And so then I'll introduce you to those methods by demonstration, basically showing you things like this, which are, this is Spawn 1.0. And then I'll give you the current status of Spawn 3. And as I mentioned, the real goal here is to have a discussion to help guide the development of Spawn. Right, so the NEF, I guess I can do this pretty quick. We think of it as a kind of neural compiler, right? So if you have a high-level function that you express as a dynamical system, then you can use these methods for compiling that into a spiking neural network. We introduced three representations. So, or sorry, three principles. The first is the representation principle. This is basically how do you map vectors in a state space to spiking activity in a neural circuit. The second is how do you manipulate those representations. So you can think about it as state space manipulations, but then you can derive connection weights in the neural circuit to let those computations happen. And then the third, the dynamics principle, is essentially applying those first two to the case of recurrent neural networks, where you sort of take your representations and you self-update them over time. So what it lets you do is essentially compile any dynamical system into a spiking model. Now, of course, there's lots more to say about how you do this efficiently, how you do this for particular brain areas, right? So if you give somebody an equation that doesn't sort of automatically determine the architecture of the neural circuit that you're mapping it onto, right? So you can get that information ideally by looking at brains and so on. But in some ways, the questions that we think this answers for us is kind of how the brain computes, right? It's one reasonable hypothesis. So this is interesting, and it lets you do a lot of sort of neuroscience and build neural models. So you can sort of talk to the neuroscientists or psychologists about what they feel the function of a particular brain area that they're studying is, try to write that down as a differential equation of some kind, and then use this to generate a neural circuit, then collect the data from the neural circuit, in terms of spikes, dynamics, tuning curves, and all these kinds of things, compare it to the data you get from the actual circuit, see what you get right and what you get wrong, and then it gives you a hypothesis about what that particular mechanism might look like. Right. So the thing that you have to bring to this, of course, is the high-level function. So it doesn't answer the question of what the brain computes, right? And so that was kind of the purpose of this second book, How to Build a Brain, in which I am very clear that we have not built a brain and we're not done. It's just a sort of suggestion about how one might go about this. So this is where we introduced the early work on the semantic pointer architecture. And chapter 7 of this book essentially is the world's largest functional brain model, as we like to call it. So that's SPAWN. So you can see it sort of running here. SPAWN 2.0, so that's the one I'm going to use as a reference because it's better than SPAWN 1, basically. So it has about 6 million neurons in it, 20 billion connections. So, at the time, it was a really big network. Now, because of all these language models with trillion connections, it's not quite so big, but it's still very big for a recurrent neural network. There's lots of different types of neurotransmitters. So we have like 4 classes, including excitatory, inhibitory, things like dopamine and so on. The anatomy and the physiology of the model are matched to particular brain areas. And of course, the key thing for us is that it's functional, right? So there are other large-scale brain models out there, as you might know, but I would argue that none of them are sort of functional in the way that we try to capture here. And of course, this is because we come from an engineering background. So we want to build a thing that exhibits the behavior. And it also is because, ultimately, I think of the brain as the controller for the body. So in SPAWN 2, we've got a bunch of different tasks. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples to give you a sense of the sort of style of modeling that we've done. So here we're showing different images, and it has to write a 1 if they're the same class of image. So it's like 2 monkeys, or a 0 if they're a different class of image. So you can imagine basically the vision system here, it's been trained on ImageNet, it's got about 1,000 different categories. We've also trained it on MNIST, so it can write digits out when you show it digits, which is what it's doing now. The full model is spiking, right? So it spikes all the way through. You show it an image, everything else after that is spikes. It then ultimately generates tensions that go into these muscles that change the forks on the joints that move the arm in the pattern that you see it drawing out, right? So a couple of things to point out. It's very disembodied, right? So it has a single eye, a single arm. It stares at the screen, and its sort of answer space never moves. Nevertheless, we could run lots of experiments on it because this is actually not that dissimilar from what we do to people and animals when we run experiments on them, right? We take all the embeddedness away. Yeah.
Can you say a word about how the connections are either established by handcrafting or learned?
I can, yeah. Actually, that might be better to do when I get a little bit later. So yeah, I'll show like functional diagrams, and then yeah, I can remind me if I don't get back into that. Right. So because it's a model, of course, we can look at every single bit of data that we want, right? So here you can see this is basically like, yeah, oh, right.
Thank you. Try never.
So unnatural. All right, so we can see all the spikes in this sort of thought bubble, which would be the spikes in primary visual cortex. And you can also see essentially what's being decoded from primary visual cortex when these digits and question marks and things pop up there. But that's actually not enough to solve the task, right? You have to remember the digit for some length of time. So we have working memory systems here in some frontal areas. And again, you can see things being decoded, and you can see that stable over time even after the input disappears. And then last but not least, in sort of primary motor areas, you can see the set of points that the model is trying to move the arm through in order to write its answer out. Again, that is converted through essentially a cerebellar model and so on into tensions in the arm. So, we can extract components. So this is the SPAN vision system alone. So here we're just showing it a bunch of things, and you can see these sort of classifications popping up on the right-hand side. You can look at this and just notice some interesting things, like you get this sparsification over time as you go up through higher layers, which is sort of consistent with what we know about the vision system. This was trained as a deep neural network, right? So the way that we set the weights here was we basically, gave it the same number of layers that we wanted to model in the brain, and then we trained it using backprop, and then we have techniques where you can essentially convert any non-spiking network to a spiking network, and so we use those.
This feed-forward system? Yeah.
This is feed-forward, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are those side branches though that you have there? With
These things?
Those ones, yeah.
Those are biases. Yeah. So we can take that data and we can analyze it, the same way that we would analyze data coming out of a monkey, right? So that's what we're showing here. So, this is some tuning curves that were inferred based on temporal spike data that you can collect from a monkey, because, so what you're used to seeing when you see these in deep learning papers is basically people are plotting weights, right? But it's very, very difficult to measure weights in a biological brain. So instead what they do is they show, like a bunch of white noise, and they look at all the different tuning and the different circumstances, and then they infer what the properties of those neurons are. And so we use those same techniques, right? So that's one of the things that we like about modeling things at the sort of spiking level, is you can then do exactly the same analysis methods that you would use on the data that you'd collect from a biological system. And so unsurprisingly, we get like the right types of tuning, Gabor-like things and so on. And so that's one type of analysis we can do of the model. Another one, this is sort of more of a neural dynamics type of analysis. So here we have data from a rodent performing a bandit task. So this is a reinforcement learning task that Spawn can do. So this is the rodent, and this is the model, recording from the ventral tegmental area equivalent in the model. And so, yeah, you can kind of look at the dynamics of individual spike trains and so on. And then you can also do the same sort of filtering that they did in the original paper and see, how good of a match is it. And I always like to complain that there's no error bars here, so we don't really know how good a match it is, but there's an issue going on here. And if there is, of course, you could go back and try to introduce something about the dynamics. Sorry, yeah. Right here, you might be worried about right there.
Shot learning.
I'm old now. So. Right, so a lot of these are fairly low-level tasks that animals can do as well as humans. And so we also have Spawn doing what we consider clearly cognitive tasks. So this is a task based on the Raven's progressive matrices. So this is a test of fluid intelligence in humans. And here, what you're supposed to do, so you can do this task interactively, is figure out what goes in the question mark at the end there. Important thing to know is that, like, maybe you never saw this task before unless you've seen me give this talk. But the model basically treats it like it's never seen this information before, right? So it's trying to do inference to the best explanation. So it is sort of on-the-fly inference, which was one of the sort of new things about the way that we're approaching the Raven's progressive matrices.
Ask what it is. The audience? You don't involve the audience? Okay.
I mean, what is it?
555.
You're wrong. I mean,
Wrong?
no. Yeah,
Well,
right.
just the standard timer I see, right?
What was that?
Just the standard timer I see, wasn't it?
A
No,
standard
what is the
timer.
next step then? Oh, what?
Oh.
Yeah,
Right, yes. That's exactly what it is.
intercontinental ones.
Right, anyway, so this is Spawn doing it, and you can see it just kind of stares at a screen and gets all the information, and then it also gets the right answer, just like you guys did. So that's nice cognitive task. That was in Spawn 1. In Spawn 2, we introduced what we called instruction following. And instruction following makes it actually difficult to start counting tasks anymore, because you can basically tell it what you want it to do, and then it does whatever you say, with some restrictions, or actually like significant restrictions on, you know, exactly what the syntax and semantics of the sort of task space is. For Respond 2, we could basically let it combine any of the tasks that it already knew how to do in different ways, take answers from one part of the sort of task and apply it to another part. So in order to get this notion of mental gymnastics across, I like to do the following, again, interactive experiment. So imagine in your head the letter V, a capital V, then imagine a capital B and rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise and put it on top of the V, and then erase the back of the B. And what shape do you have?
That's hard.
So I heard some people get it. Yeah. Did anyone, do you want me to say the instructions again, or?
Yeah. Say it again once more.
All right. So you have a capital V.
V.
V, the letter V. Yeah. Yeah. And a capital B as in Bravo. You rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise.
Which one? Only the B.
The B, 90 degrees counterclockwise. You place it on top of the V and then erase the back of the B.
And erase it.
Erase the back of the B.
Is the nerd more smarter than?
Right, and so a lot of people are doing this, so they're not ruining it for the people in front, but yeah. So, yeah, there are basically two answers that I get. So one is a heart, and the other answer, ice cream cone. Yes, exactly. So like a 2-scoop ice cream cone. So it kind of depends how steep you imagine that connecting point. But the point of this is basically you were sort of generating representations in your head, you were manipulating them internally, you were applying them to each other, you're basically following a bunch of instructions, right? And so it's, you know, sort of loosely labeled mental gymnastics. So now Spawn is going to do something like that. It doesn't have spatial representations. So instead, it's going to sort of follow all of these. And this I'm going to go over multiple times because it goes pretty quickly. So the first thing it's doing here is finding a pattern, meaning it has to, it's like the Raven's matrix that has to tell like how you transform the first input to the second input. So the answer there is 2. And then it's doing question answering, which means it's going to tell you what's in the second position. So position 2 in the list of 472. And so it wrote out a 7. Now it's applying the pattern. So it's adding the 2 to the position in the list. So it added, or sorry, it's adding the 2 to every item in the list. So it did 6, 9, and 4. And then it's applying the pattern. So that's the thing it inferred in the first line to the position question. So 2 plus 2 and wrote out a 4. All right, so I will do it again. All right, so starting by finding a pattern. So 1 takes you to 3, 2 takes you to 4. What's the relationship? So thinks of a 2. And now it's doing question answering. So it's given the list 472 and it's asked what's in position 2. So it writes out a 7. And then it's adding the 2, its answer to every item in the list. So it gives us 6, 9, and a 4. And then it's adding the position it was asked about to the pattern it discovered. And so 2 plus 2 is 4. So you can see that here we had it write out a bunch of its intermediate results, but it doesn't have to do that, right? It's basically storing all that information in working memories and so on, and then manipulating them. So it's because it's not reading what it writes. Right, it's doing it all internally. Yeah.
What do you mean by pattern? You mean add 2? What do you mean by pattern here?
So basically it says like what transformation gets you from 1 to 3 and from 2 to 4.
Adding 2.
Adding 2.
Okay. Operation. Right?
Yeah, it's like an operation.
Okay.
Which is like in the Raven's progressive matrices, you were noticing there was like 1 item, then 2 items, and 3 items. So you're like adding 1 of whatever the item
Oh, I
was.
see.
Yeah.
So Spawn 2 cannot do the example you just gave us.
No.
Because it doesn't have spatial risk.
It doesn't have a spatial
Space
working memory.
doesn't have a space. Okay.
That's right.
Very good.
Yep.
But Spawn 3 can do that.
No. So it might be able to, right? Who knows? So we do have models of spatial working memory. So it is the kind of thing that we could introduce.
But you handcrafted these things that you decided I'm going to be able to add numbers, figure out the things. You decided what those set of things it was capable of for you.
So, well, actually, so yeah, I think
Okay, yeah.
yes and no, right? So yeah, so the way that we model it, so now I'm gonna show you basically 2 views of the Spawn model, and the second one I'll get to those kinds of questions. So the first view is kind of the biological view, right? Think of it as a brain. It's got a bunch of brain areas. The brain areas are connected. Everything, like we're running it on a GPU. We also work to get it running on Spinnaker. We've got big chunks of it on there, but never the whole thing, unfortunately. It basically is a big neural network, it's got weights, it's got synapses, it's got spikes, and that whole thing is just being solved. Like all those equations are being solved at every time step. So you just think of it as a big biological system, essentially, or model of the system. So here, this is the basal ganglia, which is actually subcortical. So it looks a little weird, but that's kind of the key part of the model for controlling decision-making about what the next actions are to perform. It's got motor areas, right? So there's premotor area, primary, supplementary motor area, posterior parietal cortex, and frontal areas. These are working memories. These are important for doing things like tracking which task is being performed, right? So executive working memory is kind of known to be in frontal areas. These are the ventral visual pathway leading up to AIT. There's also a thalamus, which is kind of projecting to all of these areas, and many of these areas are projecting into basal ganglia. And basically every connection in the model is a real connection in the brain. And as I mentioned before, the types of neurotransmitters, sort of physiological properties and so on are matched to the brain areas that we're modeling. So the other view is this one here. And you can see that I've kind of color-coded the, boxes to be, consistent with what we saw in the previous slide. So for instance, PPC and DLPFC, those are types of working memory, and so they're kind of part of this working memory box. But what you'll notice here is these are now all basically functionally identified boxes. None of them have any names of tasks on them, right? So there's no part of the brain to do adding per se, right? Instead, we have visual input being processed, leading to some encoding, which is then being broadcast basically across a lot of different parts of cortex. And that broadcasting is essentially being controlled by the action selection system, which is the basal ganglia, right? So you can think of each of these boxes as being kind of like a gate that's being turned on and off depending on the task demands. And so that way of what boxes get turned on and off in what order is sort of like the algorithm that the neural system is running as a whole. And that's the kind of thing that we did build into it, right? So, psychologists have some ideas about, how do you solve particular types of tasks? So what are the cognitive strategies? And so that's the kind of thing where we could figure out essentially how to set up the action selection system in the basal ganglia to allow that to happen, given these different information processing capabilities in the system. Okay.
But why do you have, for example, just to pick one thing, if you don't mind, please, it saves a lot of time later if you use the mouse. Yeah, I don't have to do this Zoom, I don't have to do this arrow stuff in Adobe Premiere later, right? Why do you have this additional box on the transform calculation? That little box at the bottom.
So this is because I might turn that on and off, basically. So I can inhibit it, or I can not. I can also implement different types of transforms potentially. And so this transform calculation actually is the one that is sort of figuring out, how you went from 1 to 3 and 2 to 4, or when you were doing the Raven progressive matrices, what is the transform? And so this is basically doing learning on the fly. It's like learning in the activity space, not in the weight space, of how to sort of best predict the next item given the input and output. Right. And you can see there's reward evaluation. This is learning, right? So this is for the reinforcement learning. This particular connection is doing on the fly weight learning for that task and so on. So there's tons more that we can dive into here, but I just again wanted to give a sense that as we're thinking about expanding this model, right, we don't really want to say, oh, I've got a good task idea, I'm going to put a box in for that task, right? Because there's all kinds of interesting arguments about why this is maybe not a great way to think about the brain, despite all the fMRI literature where you often see those kinds of claims being made. And so that's the kind of thing that we want to think about, right? Is how to add in components which let us do a bunch of new different things. Yeah.
I don't see from here, but you have an associated memory component.
Yeah, there's associated memories in the information encoding in several different places.
I see.
Yeah.
And so the spatial representation of that base and B and the cone could be solved by that.
It could be included in the working memory system up here.
Yeah.
It was like 6-shot learning, so they did it this time. So right now this working memory, the working memory is in some ways generic, right? So it remembers high dimensional vectors. And because we have methods now that we did not have when we built this for representing spatial maps with high dimensional vectors, we can use essentially the same memory structure for doing visual working memory as well. Yeah.
Is there long-term memory?
Sorry?
Long-term memory.
Long-term memory, yeah. So the associative memory is a long-term memory, right? And there's lots of long-term memories, right? So all of the, there's different types of long-term memory, right? So there's long-term memory for executing actions, which are the mappings between like cortex and basal ganglia and basal ganglia back to cortex. There's long-term memories about sort of how to move the arm.
And the weights.
The weights, yeah, exactly. And one of the things that we did not do a lot of here, basically the only place that we're doing online learning here is in the reinforcement learning. So that's the only time that anything like a long-term memory is getting changed. But in the new model, that's something that we're definitely interested in expanding a lot. Right. So, the kinds of representations that we've been trafficking in, right, are discrete representations. So these are sort of like language-like things. These are important for cognition kind of generally, but also specifically for the Raven's progressive matrices task, and yeah, some of the other tasks. And so we're using vector symbolic algebras, which I'm suspecting most people are familiar with, where we're using like binding, bundling, similarity ops, and these are all already implemented in the model, right? So we're very happy to keep using more VSA functions. We also have continuous representations. So these are like the SSPs that Nicole was talking about. This is new to Spawn 3. And these are nice for explaining things like place cells, grid cells, time cells, and so on in biology. And SSPs is definitely a key way that we do that. For time cells, we actually use more like a state space model for capturing those. Probabilistic representation, right? So you can actually use SSPs for doing probability representation as well, kind of thinking of them as a map, as Michael has been developing a bunch of that work. And so, we can essentially take the dot product between two SSPs and it defines a kernel that we can use for doing kernel density estimation, right? It's the sync kernel, which is a little bit weird, but it works perfectly well. And then use things like Langevin dynamics for doing sampling from those representations. So to give you an update on where we currently are in development of Spawn 3. So we're using IsaacSim as our physical world. So the kind of biggest change that we want to capture is going from that model staring at a screen with an arm to a robot body in the three-dimensional world. That is a very big change, right? So it introduces all kinds of additional complexities. And exactly the best way to handle that is something that I'm also happy to talk about. But so we need a physics simulator, so we picked IsaacSim. We're using Nengo, which is sort of like our in-house neural simulator, that in order to do all of the brain modeling. We've implemented SLAM in a spiking neural network. So this is Nicole's PhD work. And right now we put that into Nengo connected to IsaacSim and are able to control a robot body in a 3D environment doing SLAM. And that's kind of the example that I'll show you about. We've also connected a camera to the simulated environment in order to get visual information. We've implemented a simple vision model for classification. And we have a depth estimator, which was poor when I made the slide. It's a little bit better now. But it's the kind of thing that is useful for doing SLAM. We've also updated the core code of like the Spawn 2.0 model in order to get it ready to be integrated into this 3D world. So one of the things we also want to do is we want the new model to do everything that the old model did plus stuff, right? So we're trying to, again, make sure that it's clearly sort of an advance over the previous work. And we've built a navigation-based spatial working memory experiment. So I will be showing that in more detail. And that's basically going to be the kind of example that we take as the type of thing that we'd like to do more of with this model. And we also have a sort of new working memory, long-term memory model that's in progress where we've kind of unified the two of these. So I've had some students coming through the lab working on that because it's clearly something that we could stand to improve. And I think we've done a pretty good job. And now we need to sort of move to the integration phase and get it to sort of be playing the role that our old working memory was playing before. So to make things a little bit more real, right here we've got a top-down view of the environment. And here's a sort of three-quarters view. We call this the working memory experiment, right? So this is basically reproducing an experiment where we've got some nice neural data. And here we call this the arcade. And what this basically has is the robot staring at a screen and then being able to do all the tasks that Spawn 2.0 could do, right? So we originally were trying to think about how to make those tasks ones that you could just kind of reproduce in a 3D world with sort of physics, but it doesn't work, right? And this is exactly a complaint that you hear a lot in psychology experiments. There are people who say, oh, all the psychology experiments don't make any sense because they don't reflect what's going on in the real world. And yeah, it's kind of true. And so what we did is we set this arcade up where now we can just have a robot stare at a screen, show it a bunch of stuff. And then we'll move the arm around in the same way that we did before to like write out numbers or something like that. But more interestingly, I want to sort of take you through this experiment. So in this experiment, you basically have people in virtual reality, and they have ECOG, I believe it is, right on their cortex, right? So these are epilepsy patients. And they're never shown this top-down view, right? The one on the left, but that's kind of like the view that I showed you, that we've reproduced in Isaac-Sim. Instead, what they do is they move through a sort of normal first-person egocentric view. They walk up to these chests. The chests then pop up an item that's sort of hidden in the chest when they're close enough, and then they move on to the next item, right? So they're basically like moving through this environment, going to these chests, and when they're close, the item pops up, and then they have to go. They get a distractor task for a little while, and then they're basically asked about, what do you remember, right? Like, where are all the things in the environment? And the way they're asked this is they're basically shown an item. Then they're asked whether they're sure it is there in the map, if it might be in the map, or if it's definitely not in the map. So they have to sort of identify a degree of uncertainty. Then they point to where they think that item is, and then they get feedback about whether they were right or wrong about where the location of the object was. And so down here, you can see sort of like the mean accuracy. This is basically a bunch of behavioral data. And you can look at the relation between accuracy and the confidence that they reported. And then on the right-hand side here, we've got a bunch of recordings from hippocampus, where they've analyzed the data by breaking it into sort of different frequency bands and then looking at the dynamics of the frequency band and splitting it out between ones that, where there was like no item in the box, or where there was something that they confidently or they did see and confidently remembered, et cetera, right? So that's basically the kind of data that we'd like to replicate. So this is our attempt to do the same kind of thing in that environment, 3D environment in Isaac-Sim. So both of these things are basically happening at the same time. So down here in the bottom left, this is its first-person view. Here you can see the actual path, which is sort of the solid line. Then there's the dotted line, which is the desired path that we're trying to make it go through. And then the dashed line is where it thinks it is, right? So that's it performing the SLAM task. On the other side, let me run that again. On the other side, you can basically see a third-person view of the robot walking through the world. These are all the boxes on the tables. Here, it's associative memory, right? So this is basically the map that it's building up over time, and this is done through learned weights. And so you can see that it basically thinks so the squares are the actual location, and then the other ones are like so where it thinks those items are. And then by the time it gets back, we can then move to the next step, which is run the rest of the experiment, right? Where you query, where's the thing, how certain are you, et cetera. But the important thing for us here is that, in this neural network, we've got an associative memory, which is building up. So it's learning a map online. It's also able to tell where it is in the environment, right? Which is why it can build that map up, because it's using that information to sort of put representations of those objects at those locations. Do you have a question?
Yeah, but of course, this is all a big vector. There's no notion of physical space. It's just some vector representation, some abstract vector representation.
That is its notion of physical space. That's how it represents physical space, yeah. Which I think is pretty reasonable, because that's kind of, I don't know, everything in the brain is big vectors, and so
doesn't have like the maps that you get, the place cells and
yeah. So this entire network shows place cells and grid cells and so on.
Okay.
Yeah. And so in the next slide here, I've got basically a mapping onto hippocampus, right, of the activity while that was going on. So here, right, this is entorhinal cortex. These are basically the place cells. So this is keeping track of where it is in space, and this is getting updated based on its input about knowing what its velocities are and so on. And then CA2, this basically lights up whenever it's encountering a new item, and we're trying to encode that into memory, right? So very brief, but these are the kinds of activities which we can now filter in the way that they did in the original experiments and compare to the ECOG data. So yeah, the same sort of principle. Everything's going like being run in spiking neurons and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll try to figure out. It's always tricky to know exactly how to map it onto different modalities of measuring the brain, but yeah, there are some sort of reasonable things to do there.
Are the
Yes.
oscillations in the millet vector, do they appear that they're in time?
the
The lateralized oscillations.
Right.
those
So
tasks.
yeah, so there's definitely one thing to mention about that is that we only have one half of a brain, right? So we don't have a lateralized difference. Those oscillations, we've done some initial analysis, and there are things that look kind of similar-ish at this point, but it's too early to basically say much. Yeah.
But let me ask you a high-level question.
Yeah.
So your concept is based on these VSAs, right? Hyperdimensional computing, that you map neural network to vectors. And
Part of
then you take advantage of the mathematical properties in the algebra, right? So can you explain also when you do this, do they work inside each unit or also across the regions, the different components, the different
So all
areas of brain? Are you applying these mathematical concepts in some way that go beyond what we have by just stacking neural networks on top of?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by the last one, but so for like every operator in a VSA, we have a neural circuit, and they're all very simple, right? So things like similarity operator is a dot product, and you basically get that for free in every neural network. Things like the binding operator, right? So that takes like one layer to compute a binding operation. And all of the representations are distributed, right? So you have state space represent. This is kind of like all the NEF stuff, right? Where you have some vector representation, you have a method for projecting it onto neuron activities. Those neurons have preferred directions in that vector space, right? So you can then look at the properties of individual cells and relate it to the state space. But the VSA is essentially defining relations at the state space, right? And then all of that stuff is kind of projected into the neurons. And so there's like nothing, there's nothing magic going on. There's no sort of cheating in the sense that these are all just leaking integrate and fire neurons connected with a bunch of weights in some particular way. The methods that we use for determining those weights vary, right? So sometimes we use deep learning methods, sometimes we do like reinforcement learning, sometimes we do the NEF type techniques, but those are all basically optimization techniques, right? So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but you know, we consider ourselves neuroscientists after we've built the model, and we go in essentially with an electrode, and then we record from neurons that are scattered throughout the circuit, and we take all of the neurons and kind of relate them to a particular spatial location in the brain that has some kind of functionality, and yeah, try to basically go from our best guesses about how all these things connect together, right? So did that answer your question?
So basically the binding operation goes across regions, I think.
So a lot of the binding happens inside regions. So like in the path integrator, basically, this is like a recurrent binding operation. So all those connections are like recurrent connections inside that network. Sometimes like the operation is always going to be sitting in a particular area, right? So you send information about the two vectors that are going to be bound together. And then there's like one population that basically combines those to give you the bound output. And so wherever that population of neurons is sitting is where you would consider the binding to have happened. And so you might have different hypotheses about where that happens, and you might have information about sensitivities of neurons that help you place where the best location for the binding operator is.
So you've got a set of different tasks that you're trying to achieve. So you've got a computer vision bucket, you've got place recognition, some localization, etc. And you also mentioned that you've got a set of different types of optimizations going on, depending, I assume, on the task.
No.
On the task.
So yeah, so everything is pre-built. So there's no learning like of the NEF type or the deep learning type. All the learning is online learning. So it's all like local learning rules that are updating just in ways that look like spike time independent plasticity or some kind of error-driven Hebbian learning. So that optimization, like the online optimization, that's a sort of different bucket, right, for us. And those are things that run while the model is running. Yeah. All the other methods are offline optimization techniques. Yeah. Yeah, these are good questions because I think it helps you think about like what might be the interesting things to make this model do. What's it going to be good at and bad at? Right, so some example next steps. This I'll do pretty quickly. So if you saw Varun's talk, this is going to be very familiar. So one of the things that everybody's now talking about are large language models. People have been trying to map large language models onto Cortex, right? Saying, oh, these layers of the large language model map onto these layers of Cortex. They let us predict activity there and so on. So it's kind of early days to see if they can do a very good job. But there are ways of arguing that it's not an unreasonable place to start. But obviously, one of the things that they're pretty bad at is this kind of sort of logical reasoning, step-by-step reasoning. And Barun's work is a way of trying to introduce that sort of into an LLM. And we're kind of at an interesting place with the spawn model because we have this action selecting system, right? The basal ganglia, which is really good at going through an algorithm, right? It can essentially, given a current state, update the next state, given the new next state, update the next state, and so on, right? So it can very sort of stepwise execute things. And that's what you need in Vernon's methods in order to go from your VSA representation to sort of like a guaranteed output, given that VSA input. And so, yeah, it kind of like, I think it would be interesting to say, look, we can stick a language model in here, but because we've embedded it in this sort of biological action selection system that's dynamically updating itself, we can make it reason better, right, than if we were just kind of using the LLM itself. So Vernon already talked about this. And ideally, if we combine these two things, we can sort of demonstrate this advantage of merging a bio-inspired model of cognition, so SPAWN, with a biologically constrained but AI-driven method. And part of the bio constraint would be why I would pick an SSM type of model up here, right? Because then it's recurrent and it's much more sort of biologically plausible. So he has tested this on math problems. This is the sort of way that he does the interaction, where you've got sort of the token representations at some layer. So layer 17, I think, is the one that he found the best success at. Introduce this encoder. So this is where you map from the LLM representation into a VSA representation, right? So that's something that looks like what I've got down here at the bottom, right? So if you ask it this question in language, what is 910 mod 213? Then what the encoder is doing is basically taking however the language model is representing that and converting it into this structured VSA representation, right? Where you explicitly pull out what the hundreds is, what the tens is, what the ones is in the first number, the second number, and also what type of problem you're being asked to solve. Then you can basically use that information in some kind of symbolic algorithm. So he just had Python code. But of course, we can implement symbolic algorithms quite efficiently in Spawn, right? So now we can implement, you all learned how to add 2 3-digit numbers together by adding the, sort of memorizing how to add 1 digits and carrying the 1, and right, that's an algorithm. So that's the kind of thing you can implement using Spawn. And what he showed is that you get a really big improvement in the ability of these LLMs to perform these sort of simple math problems.
Can you explain this kind of plot that
Yeah.
people show?
Yeah, so this basically is showing the accuracy across a bunch of different tasks. So the tasks are all listed around the outside. The accuracy for a given model is kind of where the dot lands between 0 and 100. And so you can see the blue is the neurosymbolic LLM, and so it's doing much better than either a standard LLM, which is an orange, a chain of thought prompting, or a LoRa trained model. And it's really quite a significant improvement. Here, these are 2 types of math that actually LLMs do well. So they can add and they can do integer division. And so he did not include those as ones to do an interaction with. So he does not sort of intercept and generate the representation and so on. And the important point here is it also does not ruin the performance of the LLM on those other models, right? So you can kind of like pick and choose where you apply the algorithm. So basically, if you're good at memorizing whatever the problem is, you don't have to interfere.
So what LLMs are you using here? Because I imagine that they're pretty good at spawning up their own algorithms to do bitwise.
Yeah, this is so this is I think 7 billion, lemma 7 billion. Yeah. Actually, you can go like I was the same way. I'm like, what? So I went and I was like asking the latest Claude. It was like Sonnet 3.7 at the time, and you can very quickly get them to be extremely uncertain about any math. It's really weird. Yeah, but yes. So it's definitely a.
But your Spawn executable is that handcrafted to the task of there.
So this is a proposal at this point, right? So right now in the paper we're using Python code, right? So you take you take the LLM representation. You map it into a VSA representation. You then can easily decode this into just standard representations that it's fine to put it through some Python code that's just executing a simple algorithm to solve whatever type of task you're solving. And then it generates another VSA representation of the answer. And then it basically adds that back into the representation in the LLM in order to direct the model to give the right answer.
Okay, so what's the blue one?
Sorry, the blue one?
Yeah.
That's what I just described.
So it's proposal, what do you mean by it?
So the spawn, actually doing this symbolic algorithm with spawn is the proposal. So this the paper originally just used Python code where we would now put a spawn executable in.
So the Python code then, this is handcrafted to the task of doing.
Well, yeah, it's just like, what algorithm would you do if somebody asked you to do bitwise ANDing of two input digits, right? So you probably have some algorithm that you would execute. So it's that.
But my question is that you're comparing to a transformer that has to learn to do these things.
No. No, this is in a transformer, right? So these are all the layers of a transformer. This is taking, oh, okay, you get that.
Your Python code says
Yeah.
it's handcrafted.
Yeah, the Python code is the algorithm that will, so think of it this way. When you prompt the LLM with chain of thought, right? If it was smart enough, what it would do is it would say, oh, this is a bitwise AND. So I'm going to execute the following algorithm. It would write it out. It would then make itself step through the following algorithm to get the right answer, and it would report that out.
But that it would need to search among all the different methods that it has available to it, whereas here you're basically putting your own.
Well, no, here, you're driven by the problem type, right? So depending on the problem type, you have to search amongst all your methods and pick the one that matches the problem type you're being asked about. And the LLM is doing the same thing, right?
These are algorithms that you have put there as Python code.
Yeah, so each of those is a Python code algorithm. And the proposal here, and so the idea is that when you are asked this kind of question, what you do is you bring up an algorithm that you can use to solve that question, and then you step through it systematically where you're basically guaranteed to get the right answer if you know the algorithm. So that's exactly what we've replicated here.
If you handcrafted a module and add on module just for these math problems.
Yeah, understand, but you said a fair comparison.
Yeah, it's a very fair comparison in the sense that
Model on, right?
I mean, if you
Well-
compare it to a calculator, I think that might be a more fair comparison.
Oh, okay, if you added a calculator.
Well, I mean, the whole point is that this is what large language models are bad at, right? Is they're bad at discovering an algorithm that they can systematically follow to answer these problems. So the question is, how do you get them to be good at it? You could train them with a lot more data. So that's what LoRa is trying to do, right? It's basically trying to train them with specific information for each problem type and be able to recognize the problem type, execute the LoRa module, and then give you the right answer.
Why do people object to this? I mean, if I have to do that, I need to put a calculator. What's wrong with
No, but you can do this internally also, right? So if I ask you to add two 3-digit numbers, you will revert to the algorithm that you learned sitting in your associative memory that you're bringing up and then executing. And that's exactly the proposal that we're making here. That this is what you should do to large language
But the
models.
answer would be better, maybe just to understand this. It's fine to do that. I think it's a good idea, but then comparing this to a transformer that did not have that inductive bias, okay, I want to solve math problems. You can actually be trained to solve anything. It's kind of not a fair comparison in that sense. Transformer can do a lot of other things.
It shows that you could do it much more easily this way, but.
Yeah,
But on these specific problems, because those Python codes were added there, it's fine, but it's
No,
not
but
comparing like a calculator.
It also clearly highlights a limitation of LLMs. Like it's the whole claim that you have an unbiased, like you don't need an inductive bias in order to successfully learn all the cognitive tasks, I think is a terrible one, right? So it's basically like a cognitive hypothesis, right? A lot of people want to think that if we just add enough data to an LLM, then we solve all the cognitive problems and we'll get as good as people and everything, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that is inconsistent with what we know about how cognitive systems work. This to me is more consistent with how we know, and it makes clear, like you're not adding much, right? It's in terms of parameters. So we use the same number of parameters as we do for the LoRa training, and the change in performance is enormous. So you can think of it that way, right? It's like testing a cognitive hypothesis. Yeah.
So let me just summarize another question. So you have this Python code that transforms the LLM into something that Python code can be implemented in Spawn. Now, does Spawn have a way of discovering all the, how is Spawn going to discover the algorithms that you need to do?
Right. So 2 points of clarification. So one is that the Python, so it's a neural network that maps from the LLM representation to the representation that is then decodable into something a Python function can handle. Then you execute the Python, right? And we're not saying Spawn should execute Python, right? What we're saying is, once you have this representation as a VSA, the one at the bottom here, then we can implement an algorithm in Spawn. It won't be Python, right? It'll be a bunch of vector transformations and binding and unbinding and so on and so forth. in order to calculate the answer in a very predictable way. And this is the problem with LLMs, right? They don't do things in extremely predictable ways.
Is it kind of fair to say that your SSM here is routing to, it's learned to route to the appropriate algorithm that has been previously written?
So I mean, yeah, this is an interesting question, right? So this is, yeah, more
Intuition, right?
Yeah, like I think that's close. I'm not sure. So when you look at the work where people are, like basically inside of a language model, pulling up a Python generator and then like generating Python and running it, and like I don't think of it like that, right? Because that's essentially, that would be more like offloading to the environment, where if I started like writing stuff on paper or I was like using external tools. So the idea here is it's all internal, but I think it's the right type of intuition, right? Is that if you are an expert user of math, right, then you have learned algorithms for handling the representations that you're presented with in the world, and they're internalized. So you can pull up, how to do bitwise AND, how to do bitwise OR. Like these are all things that you as computer engineers, electrical, not everybody has those in their long-term memory, but you guys do, right? And so what you're doing is you're pulling that algorithm up and you're like, I know what set of steps to go through in any case once I've represented the problem in the right way. Right.
But is there a classifier or detector that says do that?
Yeah. So this problem type, right? So that problem type is being used to recognize what, and so in Vern's talk, he had examples showing like the difference between recognized problem types, unrecognized ones, map ones, non-map ones, and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, there is essentially a classifier that, is the thing that would then be querying the long-term memory. All right. Well, I didn't expect to get stuck on that side for so long. I'm definitely happy to talk more about it, but also,
5 minutes, yeah.
I want to get back to, so that, we used the discussion in a place I was not planning, but anyways, so other possible next steps, right, other than adding in something like that, is a path planner. So in the experiment I showed, we just kind of, drew a path that would be a reasonable one to go through, and then it went through it. Adding voice recognition to give commands. So right now we give commands like what task to perform by showing it digits. But if it's wandering around in an environment now, it's not in front of the screen. How do you give it input? And so basically saying things to it. And right now this is a language and thought project that I'm sort of trying to get off the ground, see if we can get something trained up by the end of the week. Similarly, we could have it reply with voice as opposed to like making sounds, basically, instead of drawing with its arm. Adding a second camera for improved depth estimation. Adding an amygdala for fear conditioning, right? So we've done a bunch of work on fear conditioning, basically, right? So it's kind of a model we have sitting in our back pocket. That might be an interesting one. Adding a foraging task. So this is good for capturing the sort of probabilistic representations and exploiting them in some interesting manner. And maybe other things, right? Which is what I was hoping we'd be able to talk about. So the ideal types of papers or experiments that I think sort of fit what we've done so far are behaviors that require skills that you've kind of seen somehow demonstrated here-ish. What that means is we don't have to build a brand new sort of component or have to do research into any part of the brain that we're not familiar with. We want neural data in humans or other mammals. This is often a challenging one, right? So getting neural data in humans in particular is tricky. But that's, of course, since we're modeling at the level of neurons, we would like that kind of data ideally. The kinds of behaviors that, for instance, other types of technologies that solve similar types of tasks would struggle with, right? So LLMs is an example like the one I just showed. Having canonical experiments. So, in neuroscience and psychology, there are experiments that kind of get repeated over and over and over again, and then there's all the stuff that branches off them, sort of identifying those canonical ones. So we did that for working memory, right? Just doing like serial working memory, free recall. Those are like the most standard working memory experiments. So again, trying to identify those ones which demonstrate a sort of fundamental and very easily reproducible feature of the brain. And then I can just maybe throw these up here. This is the last thing I had. Is basically, here's a bunch of questions that have come up in our minds as we've been building the model. Things like, does everything have to be spiking? Because that definitely adds a layer of complexity. So, when we move from the just controlling an arm to controlling a full robot body, putting in muscles for the robot body and then controlling all the muscles as opposed to just sending torques to a joint, right, adds a bunch of complexity. That how important is that for trying to make that kind of core point that we're interested in making? So yeah, do we need a motor system that's muscle driven? Is the robot body okay? It's not a biological body. Are there other sort of varieties of bioplausibility that kind of shatter the utility of the model if we don't take them seriously and ensure that they're sort of respected by the model. On the environment side, how natural does the environment have to be? You know, do you need lots of rolling hills and trees and stuff, or being inside a building, is that kind of fine? Should there be other agents moving around? Is that sort of critical in order to establish the embeddedness of the model? Should everything be solid? So you might have noticed that our robot was just like walking through tables and stuff, as one does in robot simulators all the time. But again, and then last, on the cognition side, like what counts as obviously cognitive? So we thought that Raven's task was kind of an example, but like sticking it in an arcade, does that still make it seem like a cognitive task? Should we think about trying to move that into an environment somehow? That we sort of think there are types of cognitive tasks that only people would be able to solve, and ideally have some neural data to understand how people solve them, and so on. So yeah, I'll stop there. Definitely would love to hear everybody's comments, and here's a sort of list of people who have been instrumental in building what we've got so far. So, okay.
And your talk would be available? Your talk?
I think it's recorded.
No, I mean on the website or on the Google?
Yeah, all this stuff is, I'll show you guys the playlist from last year.
Yeah, great.
Okay, I'll share the playlist from last year.
Yeah, so definitely if you have any ideas about tasks.
You probably could go through the educational literature with the tests that they start with the small kids.
Yeah, like all the intelligent, like the block. Right. But again, a lot of.
I mean, there's educational psychology.
Yeah,
as
yeah,
the
yeah.
field, and they have some tests.
Yeah. Challenges there are often the brain data.
Oh, of course, the
Yeah.
brain data. Yeah, but at least tasks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Chichi?
but question, how much do you really need of spiking networks? Because you didn't say a word about it. So I feel like you can solve the whole, all the models using this one left models.
Well, so everything that I showed was all spiking except for the LLM
I
stuff.
understand that, but.
Yeah. Well, so
I
then,
don't feel like you've told us like why the spikes were useful, why you needed to use spikes.
so thing number one is comparison to neural data, right? So if we want to show that we have place cells and we have, all the things that are kind of known about hippocampus, like you need, the most compelling way to do that is by having spike timing, and all these kinds of things, neural dynamics. Definitely for neuroscientists, this is true, right? So, and the less you do in sort of having to translate your model into what they record, the more compelling they find it. I think that's definitely the case. Now, yeah, we can run a lot of this stuff without spikes, right? I think the dynamics are important, and we can preserve the dynamics without spikes necessarily. And it might even be the case, like if the model gets too large, it gets unwieldy to run everything in spikes also. And so we can, run some part not in spikes and some part in spikes and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's always a question. Lots of people bring it up for various reasons, right? If you want to take the algorithms and put them on neuromorphic hardware, then it's nice to have them in spikes. But yeah,
You're less religious about being SNNs now, right? Except that you are basically doing computational neuroscience here. So you have to somehow get output from the model that you can relate to
Yes.
electrode recordings.
Yes.
That's
Typically.
the idea.
Yeah, it's typically what we're doing. Yeah, and so if we have brain data like ECOG and stuff like that, they're
That's different, yeah.
having something that's just neural dynamics might be sufficient, but again, spikes are better
Yeah.
depending on the comparison data.
Your translation to spikes is via this dynamical system, right? Which it's one fixed method.
So no.
No.
So as I mentioned, we do like deep learning in some places and so on. And don't think of like the methods that we use, they all disappear once you have the model. The model is just a spiking neural network with a bunch of weights in it. Right. And that's the thing that we're comparing to the neural data, right? Nothing about DSAs or deep learning or the neural engineering framework. That stuff is all kind of not there by the time you've got your model.
What's the real-time factor now? And that's
So we don't know yet for Spawn 3. Spawn 2, it was like 20x slower than real time on a one GPU at the time, one latest GPUs.
But in old times,
Like
you're always saying, I'm having my problem, I solved it somehow, and now I'm translating it via. So this is out now, you're training on network.
No, it's exactly that. My point is that when you have the model at the end of the day, the method that you use to get to the model, especially the offline part, is essentially irrelevant, right? Like your hypothesis about the neural mechanisms are in the model with the spiking neurons connected by synapses with certain properties and certain weights.
Why is that confusing, Cornelia?
Is it true if you have solved your problem in a whatever symbolic way, and then you have one way that is basically linear to translate it in this by.
Yeah.
So I'm asking, does that generalize? Not everything's linear. I think.
It's not linear.
Oh, okay. It's not linear. Okay.
Yeah,
Are you
like,
using any of the connectivity information that's known about the the areas?
Yeah.
You're using exactly the.
What they know about the
What they know,
neuroanatomy.
yeah, absolutely. So the entire model, so, when I showed that anatomy picture, there's all these black arrows. Those are all real connections.
Yeah, but your hippocampal model, does it include all the CA1?
It includes some of them. So it's definitely not the case that we've included every connection in the brain,
Yeah,
right?
but
But every connection that's in the model is a connection in
And
the
all
brain.
the detailed layered connections and the fact that there are dendrites, some are.
So we don't have, so we don't have, like, in the base fawn model, we don't have dendrites. So in some other versions, we have those kinds of things.
Okay.
We're not enforcing like a particular connectivity structure a priori, like people often do. But yeah, I don't see a need to do that, right? So we can go and see, we can make predictions about connectivity probabilities in particular parts of the brain and see if that matches the data. We can look at the spike train variability, see if it matches the data, and like it does, right, for the cases that we've tested.
Great.
Paul has a question.
Question from online? Is it
Yes.
possible?
Grace is asking a question from NIH.
Do I need to do something?
No, I'm just asking a question. My camera's off, sorry. You showed earlier some results from a Miller 2018 paper that I believe that you had then implemented into SPAWN-3. And
Yep.
what caught my attention was that to the right side of your graph, you showed that the 40 to 100 hertz oscillation was really good at differentiating no item from recalled and not recalled items. So
Yep.
I was wondering, are you then able to use SPAWN to make predictions about what other oscillatory bands might have the similar predictive powers as well?
Yeah, we can definitely, I mean, yeah. So our first step is to reproduce this data. And as I mentioned, we sort of haven't sort of fully done it. The first thing we've done is implement the analysis to try to generate the same types of sort of pictures that you're looking at. And we get things that kind of have similar, places where the bumps, where the like activity goes up and down. And you can definitely analyze that data for, additional features and then use that as a hypothesis about what's going on in the brain. Like 100%, we would love for people to use the model in that way. Well,
So since you're wanting to look at neural data and try and compare it, why did you scale up to try and be more human-like and not scale down to be more insect-like? And then you can actually just use like the connector you have with a fly or something, and then just recreate a fly or a bee.
I'm not interested in flies and bees. This is an excellent question because there's no good answer to that question, right? And so there are definitely people who, have focused on simpler systems and tried to do, very detailed models. Insects, I think, they probably share many fewer sort of neural mechanisms with us than mice and rats do. So we're happy to look at the mammalian brains. Like that's the type of brain we think there's going to be, preservation of types of representations and mechanisms for solving problems and all that kind of stuff. And that's what we're interested in, basically. And I don't think there's a better way to justify it than to say that, to be honest.
Please.
Yeah.
Last time we used your what question, please?
Yeah.
The last time we used your model to want to model biological data in the amygdala, we came up with something that was kind of a shortcut that you didn't have a way of defining motifs, connectivity motifs in your population of neurons. Is that something that you could,
You can do that now, yeah. We have tools which will let you impose constraints when you're doing the optimization problem and then enforce those constraints. So things like, and I can send you papers and stuff.
Okay, yeah, I think that was something that it was really lacking at. That was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, there's a package called Mango Bio, which has a bunch of those methods.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for this amazing talk. Welcome to the second talk. Today is work in progress morning. And I'm going to present AxonFlow, which is my project with Himanshu. We are developing a platform, an end-to-end platform to help neuromorphic algorithms go out to the world. And since I'm the presenter, I will give you a little historic overview to put this in context. I came in 2011 with Andreas, and there was Katharina, linguist, and Janis in vision. And then in 2011, before deep learning, we tried to put already vision and sound. Andreas had a sound camera, together with reasoning, grammatical representations to think about action interpretation. Here an example from the grammar school.
That's hard to teach, really. Really hard to teach.
You see, you've moved the table over because you want to stand the state of school.
What is the issue? You don't hear me enough?
No, that you just point so that it's on the recording.
Oh, okay, I'm not pointing.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not pointing much. You see here the demo in the grammar school, the thing in the back, and we had grammatical representation coming from classical linguistics. At that time, the linguists were building their databases and knowledge bases by hands, but we put them then together with algorithms that were running, interpreting where the hands are, what people are doing. And that was cognitive. And at that point, around that time, we basically introduced cognition into neuromorphic. And my first coming, Ralph, then got me into the group, and we started writing then. Basically, I wrote the proposals to fund this workshop and kind of the mother of neuromorphic. In 2020, we went a bit further with Andreas and G-Hub. We got Neuropack, which is more than just a workshop, taking care of the communities. It also funded other activities, including fellowships. And we have this, probably you know, most of you know it, neuropack.info. That was the first effort to really reach out and make neuromorphic more popular, going out to other communities, also to explain what neuromorphic is. And now the next step is to go from Neuropack to build a platform. We are still at the level that we build models, we have really intelligent ideas, but it's still very hard to reach to other communities, to reach out to existing industry or even control theories, other communities. So this is this ongoing project, AxonFlow, that we are introducing. And coming from computer vision myself, coming from a very high level, we started with vision algorithms and event vision to build this first platform, which you will see the ongoing project, and we're introducing it here to get your feedback, to get your ideas in. For the moment, it's vision, but we want to reach out to other things, to planning, control. So what is it? For the moment, it's for internal use for the community. A platform for the first step is on everything event-based related to support research, to put on data sets, to put on algorithms, to facilitate the entrance, to make it easier to communicate, to make it easier to publish your papers. And we will show you. The bigger goal is to connect us larger, to connect academics with industry. And we are looking for ideas on how we do it, but obvious ideas are, which are especially interesting in these times. You can have your data sets online. You can have your algorithms online. Somebody comes and wants to collaborate. Here it will be, and it will be easy. It may be a new funding mechanism even for you to do something. Or you may be doing contractual work in the long term. For the moment, we are at our internal use. So what you will be seeing, this first version of AxonFlow is on vision, video, and especially event-based vision. And it should be a platform for the entire community to develop and share algorithms. What's the issue right now with event vision for others outside the community? It's really hard to get started. You still need a lot of expertise, and you will need, if you're in my position, a student to really get onto the hardware, which for other communities, computer science also, is not so easy. So this will be easier. For labs, it will allow us to share our data sets among each other easier, to collaborate in one place. For the new neuromorphs, or anything coming like from my community, computer vision or control engineering, it should facilitate how to get started. There will be all the neuromorphic data sets, there will be video data sets that are useful from different domains. And as we get on to other algorithms, that like ESA, spiking, to familiarize ourselves with neuromorphic computation. And for the seasoned neuromorphs, there should be everything there that you're usually doing on your VS Code. Start coding from scratch, benchmark algorithms. It could be an idea when you submit an algorithm, submit the code on this platform, and your reviewers can test it along with the paper. So at the very high level, what this now has, it will be having a data store, data sets, where the data sets are placed in a uniform way. That's important too. Right now, we have them hanging around in various formats also, making it harder to work with code. And there's a computational workbench there, a bench there that will be, right now it's run through Amazon algorithms. And there will be all the programming interfaces there that you're familiar with JupyterLab notebooks that we will be planning to prepare, so you can explore the data set, you can explore first algorithms, to look at through is this here the stuff you want to do. Can you visualize the flow, visualize tracking, a nice front end. And we got started by collaborating with a company that basically provided the back end from which we could work our way up then. So this presentation now will be done by Himanshu. He will show you what is already built, the first beginning. And if you would like to get on this platform, send us an email. You can explore us, the ideas, you give us feedback, what you would like, and tell us in the discussion that will follow what you think should be on such a platform, or later as you start working with and collaborating with us. So thank you. Himanshu will now show you how this works.
Thanks, Cornelia, for the intro and a nice overview of the project. So what I'll do today is give you a more live state of play of where we are with how we have implemented this, what our motivation is behind this, and where we want to see it go in the future. And I'll basically do I'll try to do a live presentation here. So hopefully Murphy is kind. So the idea behind this project kind of stems from this really cool project in neuroscience that's called Neuro Data Without Borders. And I wanted to give them a shout out because they gave me some free stuff. And also because this is a really nice idea. What they're trying to do is in neuroscience, all these different labs that record a lot of data, they have basically the same kind of data. So you're recording spike data, for example, even though you have different behavioral paradigms or recording from different animals, you have very different setups you're recording from. Everyone stores the data in different formats. So what they're trying to do is create this one platform where all the data sets can be put together in a standardized format. So it makes it easier for people to share their data and also to collaborate easily. And that's kind of what we started to do with AxonFlow. So basically, the first component of the AxonFlow is the data store. And the idea is to bring all these different data from different labs all in one place. So the problem is, for example, like if I want to like benchmark my algorithm, all the data set that I want to use are all in different places. So I have to like download all these data, which is like GBs and GBs of data onto my local computer, convert it into the format that I want for my algorithm. Because for example, like this data set is back format, it's in ADAT format. So the idea was if you have all this data in one place, someone can easily come in and do their benchmarking on all this data in one place. So it makes computation easier. It makes life easier. So what we have done right now is we have collected popular data sets that people use for many different applications. So we have data sets for eye tracking. We have the driving data sets from INI, from Scaramuzza's group. We have a lot of data, for example, for benchmarking optical flow, visual odometry, stereo matching. We have space data set from Gregory Cohen. So most of the data is right now from DVS, but we are also like example data sets, the Heidelberg data set for audio benchmarking. We have the STM-NIS for tactile. So that way, we are trying to bring more data sets in. So one of my the data sets I use a lot is the MVSEC. It's a data set I really like because I've been doing a lot of like optical flow benchmarking. And basically, so this data set, it was created by Costa's lab in 2016, I think. And what they have is a stereo Davis setup. And along with that, they have like a lot of like nice ground truth. So they have LiDAR, they have IMU, they have GPS, and I think for the indoor like drone, they have motion capture. So they have all these data set, all these different sensors in, and they put it on like a car, a bike, and a drone, and they fly around in day condition, in night condition, and they record all these different data sets. So you can take an algorithm, for example, an optical flow algorithm, you can run it, do benchmarking on it, and you can do comparison with it. So on the data store, for example, we have this data set on this data store, and we have different tabs. So for example, you can put like an overview of the data. So one thing that can be really difficult for like smaller labs or labs that are doing very niche work is that it's hard for them to share data with the community. Like for example, in Kiara's lab, we had a lot of nice data from iCup, but it would just sit there, in local storage because we didn't have ways to create like a website and put it on like a hosting platform. We don't have the IT infrastructure. So what this allows you to do is basically upload your data here, provide like a short description of the data set, and that way you can share it with the community. The other thing that we are trying to do is to not only have like the raw data. So for example, for the MVSEC data, the raw data is in bag files. So if you're using like their data set, you have to convert it to maybe like a NumPy format or a different format for using the data set. So what we're doing is we don't not only have the raw data, but we're also creating a more standardized format for the data, which we call ES process. It's event stream process data. And the idea is we take the bag files, we read them, and then we divide them into different sensor types. So you have separate data for events, for images, for ground truths. Like a lot of times you're only working with events. You don't really care about the other data, but you still have to read all this bag file to be able to just work on a very small section of the data set. So what we did is we take all these files and we divide into different sensors, and then we convert it into standard H5 format. So all the data is now in the same kind of format. So if you run your algorithm on one format, you can easily then port it to another one. You don't need to convert the data again. So what we thought is that the SDF5 format would be, right now, we thought it would be like the best solution because that's what is also used a lot in neuroscience. And that's like the initial idea we have. But again, we are open to the community if you have other ideas of how we can store the data. But basically, right now, what we're doing is storing it in this H5 format. It's the same for the images. So they're also saved in H5 in a separate H5 where you only have the images in it. The other thing that that was part of the code billings backend that was already available is the ability to be able to give specific access to specific people. So you can upload the data and then you can either share it with the entire community or you can share it only with specific people. And it's done through a concept of packages where you can basically take one of your folders and you can create a package out of it. And then you can give subscriptions to either the entire community or different people. And that could be something like a good use case for that would be if you want to do like a competition for object recognition. So you can divide the data into training and testing sets. You take the training set, share it with the entire community, let them create models on it, and then send you the models, and then you can test it on the testing data that's only available to a specific group or it's hidden from everyone else. And that allows you to create like new competition. Maybe, for example, like in Telluride, you can have like a group of students that are all working on the same data, and you encourage them to do different models using this. The other thing you can do in long term is maybe like if you're working with an industry partner, you can create like a package for like sample data which you share with the industry, and then if they like it and they want to really take all the data, you can like maybe even monetize it. So that's the idea
And what
behind.
about the data loader? Where's the data loader script, that shows you how to manipulate this MVSec? Is that included?
Yes, I get it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's basically what the data store is about. So it's basically collecting all this data and converting it into a single space. The other component of the AxonFlow is the bench itself. So this is basically just AWS machines with many different configurations. So essentially, like these are just EC2 instances that you can choose from, and you can use this then to access your data and start doing coding on it. And basically, they provide like many different configurations. So you can start from like a very simple 2-core, 4 GB system all the way to I think like 3 terabytes of RAM and 128 cores. And you can also like pick up if you want, like if you need GPU support, they have like 8 GPU system. So basically, if you're doing like if you're starting your algorithm development on the platform, you can start with like a smaller machine with subset of data, start building your algorithm. And then once you get to a stage where you want to like benchmarking on a big data set, you can choose a machine that's bigger and start doing your benchmarking on a bigger machine on a lot of data. So basically the way it works here is you have something called master node, which is the machine that you would invoke from the AWS, and then you would use that for your main computation. And in addition to that, they also have something called a node balancer machine. So this is basically a machine that you would want to run your big job on. You can choose, for example, here I've chosen like a machine that has a GPU on it, and you can choose it. There are two ways to choose it. Let me just show you. So there are two ways to choose this machine. One is on demand. When you do it on demand, it basically just gives you the machine full time. And the other way to do it is doing spot. So in spot, you can use the machine, but the AWS, depending on the dynamic usage, it can like pull away from you. So it's basically like a temporary machine that you get. But the idea here with the node balancer is that you choose a machine that you would need at some point for your computation. And then from your master node, you can invoke this, you can send a job to this machine. It would run your job, do all the training. And once it's done, it will automatically shut down. So that way you get like a temporary higher end resource to do your computation. So the third component of it, which basically ties all these different things together, are the programming interfaces, and these are essentially the web UIs for doing code development. So right now we have VS Code, Jupyter Lab. I think we'll also add MATLAB. So it's basically a place where you can do your coding, where you can use the data and you can use the master node that you have chosen. So here we have, for example, we have VS Code, so you can do your development in VS Code, or you can access the data and the machine using, let's say, a Jupyter node. So I already started like a Jupyter notebook here, a Jupyter server here. And basically, for an end user, so the way the way the code build this system is basically all this data, all the files sits on S3 buckets, and they created this proprietary layer of file system so that for an end user, it just looks like you have a Linux machine mounted, like a Linux drive mounted on your computer. So I can simply like run so all the data is stored, for example, in data store. So for example, it's this test user, it has like access to 5 different data sets. I can run like a standard Linux command on it. And I can simply see all the data that's available here. We also like started adding models in addition to data stores. And these are like basically all the different models that a lot of people use. For example, V2E for creating events from videos. We have EVFlowNet. So the idea is you have the data sets, all the data sets in one place. You can also put your models there, and then you can run any model on any compatible data set. It makes life easier because you don't need to, download around all the data. So what we've also done is created like a sample notebook that shows the way all these data and the computation resources can be used in one place. So basically, this demo notebook shows how you can explore the different data. You can manipulate, visualize the data very easily. You can, in fact, even run like an entire model. You can train a model on it. You can do inference on it, or using all these different data sets. And it can be like really useful, especially for people who are just coming in and all they want to do is like just start exploring, look at what events look like, what the data looks like. So it's like an easier way for people to get into neuromorphic computation. So like I said, like the first part of it is the exploration of the data. And basically you can run like a simple tree command and you can access all these data in one place. You can run explore the models that you have access to. We also created basic Jupyter kernels, which already have like most of the widely used like libraries for Python. So we have like NumPy, Torch, etc. But we also allow users to, have their own niche libraries if they want to use. For example, if someone wants to explore Nengo, they can simply run it. So it's by design. So let's say you're trying to run Nengo and it fails. What I can do is simply do. I can simply install Nengo and then I can restart the kernel. And you can run like a very simple example with a very like simple tutorial for Nengo. And then what you can do is like maybe change parameters and play around with it. So it's very easy for someone to come in and explore these different, for example, like Nengo or Lava and different niche libraries that you want to try. So it's easy for someone to come in and just start playing around with it. In addition, what we also have is this place called Project Shared. Basically, it's a is a space where you can create, for example, like you have a lab that wants to work on a shared project. So you can create a folder there and start working. You can give access to all your lab members and they can start working in the same place. So what we are doing right now, as part of creating additional libraries and making it more useful. So we don't just have like data, but we actually have something that makes this data useful, is we are creating data set utilities. These are basically like libraries for doing like basic manipulation of the event data and the image data. And we're also working on a project for doing benchmarking. So basically all these files are all in the shared directory where people who are working on these projects can work together. So again, like because this file system allows you to easily access the backend data, you can simply access the files using just giving it a Linux path. So for example, here I have an example of M3ED dataset. I'm giving it the.
Can you zoom it up a little bit, maybe?
I can
I don't
try.
know if it's possible. Or plus or something. Yeah, that's good. Much better.
Okay, you won't be able to see the entire. Okay, so basically what you can do is like just give it a path, and then you can, for example, explore the what is inside the H5 files. And again, with the data utilities, you can like give a command, for example, like explore H5, and it will give you all the details of what the file contains. So for example, the M3D data has all the IMU data, the different image data from the two cameras. It has the prophecy events from the left and right camera. And in addition, like I said, we are also dividing it into different individual files. So an event file only contains events in the XYPT format, and the image file contains all the images corresponding to those events along with their timestamps. You can do the same thing for any other data. So because the data is all in the same place, you can run it for MVSec data, and you can get the details of that data. The other thing you can do is start playing around with it. So you can get all the image data, and then you can start displaying the different images in your data. So I can simply change the index, and I can display these different data sets. The other thing you can do is, every user has their own home space, so you can save all the manipulations you do. You can create your own data sets. You can save it in your own home space. So for example, like one of the examples we can do is get the events and frame data from this data set. And I can compute, let's say, an event data density. So it just plots out over time what is the event rate of the recording. And these are all part of the data utilities. So you don't need to like do all this coding again. Like a student can come in, they can start using the library very quickly and start to look at what the data looks like. So for example, in this case, you can see that basically like the first half of the recording doesn't really have any events, nothing's really happening. And then only after like half of the recording is gone that you actually see some movements and start getting events. So that way you can also like decide if you want to use like a section of your data set for doing the analysis. The other functions that you provide in the data utilities, for example, doing undistortion. So if you have like calibration data for your camera and you have the events and images, you can just like invoke a single command and it will use the calibration files to undistort your data, and then you can also like display events. So you can create a frame out of the events and you can display those. You can also do like downsampling. So if you have a big data set, you want to just use it on a subsample, you can easily downsample the data with one command. The other thing you can do is you can create videos out of it very easily. So for example, if you have event data and you just want to display what the event data looks like, You can just give it the event path, create a video out of it, and very easily like visualize what's inside the scene. You can do the same thing also for the images. So you can, get all these images and create like a quick video out of it, and then you can visualize that too. And the other nice thing you can do actually is to create overlays. So you can take event data, you can take frame data, and you can create a video that's like an overlay of the two. And this is really helpful for people who are mostly doing their work in like frame-based community, in traditional community. They don't really have an idea of what all this event neuromorphic thing is about. It really gives them a sense of what the event are really about. You only have events when there is movement, and or what the events look like. Additionally, what you can do is, for example, like let's say you created a downsampling events and images, and what you can do is create a data set out of it. So you have like a downsampled M3ED data set, and then you can share it again back to the data store. So now someone else who wants to just use downsample data, they don't need to do all this processing again. They can just take the downsample data and start using it from there. The other nice aspect of this platform is that you can actually create your entire models. You can do your training and your inference on it. So the idea is, like sometimes it's like to create complementary notebooks for your papers. It's something similar that you do with like Colab, for example. The idea is like you can create your entire flow of your paper, all the data, because the data is already there. So you don't need to people don't need to download the data. So you have this one notebook on this platform. You can share it with your paper, like give it a link. And then someone, for example, a reviewer just want to reproduce your results. They just want to check if the results that you published, you put in the paper are same or not. They can simply run this notebook quickly and make sure that everything is right. Or you can provide additional data set, additional information of your network. For example, if you want to give a more detailed view of what exactly your network looks like, which you cannot really put in a paper. So you can also give it here, so that it's like a notebook that gives a reader or the reviewer additional information of your model. So I won't go into too much detail. Basically, we took the EVFlowNet paper from Costa's group, and we basically replicated it with the original MVSec data set. So we set up all the different parts of the training. So you can set up all the parameters for training. The other thing you can do is you can start with the original parameters for doing the training, and then a new user can come in, play around with the parameters, and they can see how the parameters changes the networks.
And is this VS Code that we're looking at here?
This is all Python. It's JupyterLab. It's all Python.
It's online, web like Jupyter.
It's all, yes, it's all online. So here I just skip through all these. So basically it's all the parameters to set up the training, and then you can pre-process the data for performing the training. You can read the files, and then you can simply run the train command. It can train all your model on the master node. You can also invoke the distributed bench if you want. So you can do all your training. And then what you can do is share your, you can even share your pre-trained models with people. So for example, here we have taken this model that was on one of the GitHub repositories, and we have basically put it in the public space. So anyone can use the pre-trained model for doing the inference. And again, you can use any data set that you want to invoke, and then use it on the already built up pre-trained model. So here, for example, in the original paper, they only had indoor flying 1 and 2. So we can, for example, take indoor flying 4 data and run it as an extra, just for out of curiosity, if you want to see how that data looks like. So again, I'm going to skip all this. It's basically just
Where is it all running on an Amazon compute resource or
Yeah.
where are the GPUs? Okay.
it's all running on the Amazon compute resource.
And how does that get paid for?
Who pays for it? Yes.
Yeah,
So yeah, there is a cost associated with it.
but how do you put a credit card in or what, how do you pay?
No. So basically,
Since that also for you, it's for the moment free. If you want to join, and we want you on to give us feedback, to let us know what should be on. Right now, it's only about vision, but you work on other things, RL, reinforcement learning, what should be on.
And how does it integrate together with AI coding now? Because everybody's now generating code. You copy paste back and forth now at the moment. There's no integration like in Cursor.
yes, we don't have like LLM integrations right now into it, but yeah, I mean, we're looking like for features that we can add. I think that could be one feature.
For the moment, it's DBS and video and your converters.
Yeah.
And we want to put on data sets that are useful even from the computer vision community that.
But how does that relate to this node, master and slave node that you showed before, this Jupyter notebook? How does that relate?
This is.
Is it
So-
separate?
No, so basically the way it works is, so you have the data store where you have all your files, and then that's like a permanent file system. And then you invoke a master node that's basically just a computer on the AWS platform. And then when you invoke it, all your files automatically get mounted on it.
Got it.
So you can start, for example, you start programming with a small 2-core computer, you write your code, and then you invoke another machine that has GPU on it, and all your code, all your files are still
And
there.
this Jupyter notebook has access to that bucket or
Yeah.
that virtual machine?
It has
I see.
access to
You're
all.
talking to that VM
Yeah.
there, okay,
Yeah.
or that GPU.
If a company wants to do some work, come and use your system, because presumably that's how you're gonna monetize this business. How do you assure that the buckets or the file system of the company is not visible by you or by someone
Yeah, so
else?
that's exactly. So that's where that entire system of permissions and group access comes in. So basically, you can decide exactly who sees the data. So all this home directory is only visible to me. It's not visible to anyone else. I can simply put a permission saying, I can like chmod and say 700. So no one else even can see what files exist. So.
No, but you can see them,
No, no one can.
including you.
Yeah.
I see.
So for example, like if I do, like for this user, it only has access to 4 data sets. It doesn't even know that there are other 50 data sets that exist. And they have no idea of knowing. So that's basically the idea. Like you have like these group permissions, and only the user that has the access to those can only see them. And the rest of the files are basically invisible to them.
I see.
Yeah, so actually the code wheeling, like this company, they have been using this platform for financial institutions for doing quantitative data analysis for like many years. It's a very robust system that they have developed, especially for those companies, like their data is a really precious commodity for them. And basically they make sure that no one else can see it. It's like a very robust system. The other thing they've done is they've been working with CMU for doing these competitions for students. So for every year, they have like a hackathon or a datathon where you have groups of students that are given specific data, like a training data to work with, and all the test data is hidden, so they cannot see it, and then they can create their models and get graded based on how good they
I see. But the infrastructure is code wheeling, not you.
No, the infrastructure is code wheeling, and basically what we're trying to do is cater it towards the neuromorphic. So they have all these robust systems, for example.
I get it.
Yeah. All the user data creation, monetizing, it's all there already in their setup.
And what's the relation to Neurobench? No connection directly, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so in fact, like one of the work in progress parts we have is actually creating a benchmarking framework, because the idea is like, if you have this system which already has all the training data, the inference data, you have all the models, all the same machines in one place, what you can do is start you take a machine, you have like all different combinations of models trained on different training sets or run on inference sets, and they are all running on the same machine. So you can easily do an apples to apple comparison of which model is good. It's something that's useful when you're trying to, publish a paper and you want to say that your, algorithm is faster or better than the others. The problem is, like if I want to compare my code with like EVFlowNet that came like in 2016, it has a completely different obsolete hardware that I want to use. So it's very hard to come to an apples to apple comparison. So what we're trying to do is create this benchmarking framework where you take a model, you run it on different machines with different data, and you can create like a database of all the different benchmarks.
But so are you not utilizing NeuroBench then?
No. So what we are doing right now is we are using like MLflow as the basic like foundation of how we are trying to do the benchmarking.
What's MLflow?
It's like a JSON based benchmarking system for traditional like ML algorithms. So what you can do is you can take like different data sets. So that's what you have here. It's very hard to see. But basically the idea is you have a JSON file where you give what machine you are running on, what kind of data you're using for training and testing. You pass the JSON file to the MLflow, it will run, it will do all the computations of how much time it took for doing the training, how much memory it took. It will store all the data, and then it will create another configuration file with all those. And basically creates a run ID, so that ID contains all the information, and then someone else can take that run ID, change a couple of, like for example, change training set and run it again, and then they have their own benchmark.
Is this assuming that you're then just using GPUs and CPUs and you're not using any exotic neuromorphic hardware?
Yeah, so right now, so basically all these machines that Amazon has are all just standard, CPU, GPU machines. So yeah. So yeah.
It's not replacing NeuroBench yet.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask a question about what kind of protections are there? So for example, if there was medical data, would you host it on this platform or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now, we don't have it. We are in the process of getting certifications. Like Code Wheeling is basically working to get certifications both for medical data like HIPAA and also for defense data. So that way, you can also put your defense data on it. The other thing you can do is they have also a way to be able to do on-premise computing. So basically, you don't actually need to use the AWS resources. You can connect your own machines if you have like your own AWS accounts. You can connect them to the platform, and then you will basically see them as a list of available resources. So you can only use the data and then use your own resources. So you don't need to put out the computation.
Locally.
Locally.
Yeah. So you link your local machines to AWS.
Yeah.
Would it be appropriate for kind of EEG data also that's recorded here in the workshop?
Yeah. So right now we are putting like all the like neuromorphic data, but it's basically just like traditional machines. So you can put any data you want. We even have, for example, like traditional image data like CIFAR and MNIST and those. So you can also compare your. There is a really nice data set called Virat data set. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's basically like continuous videos of like parking lots, and so, but they are continuous videos. So like the idea is you can take a video, convert it to events, and then you can see if an event-based algorithm works better than just a traditional video data set.
What's the storage limit?
There is no storage limit.
So I can give you like a 50 terabyte file uploaded?
Yeah.
Nice. And it's there forever?
It's there forever.
For the moment.
For the moment.
It's free.
Yeah. So actually, like the storage is pretty cheap on AWS. Like it's like cents. Like it's not really it's actually the computation that
Yeah.
Sorry?
The computer was expensive.
The compute is expensive.
$200 for an hour.
Oh, no. It's like 50 cents to $1 per hour. Also, it depends on which machine you are using. So I think if you use like the smallest of machines, it's like 7 cents per hour or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we just went through a major hassle to get our big data sets, the TDD, the driving data
Yeah,
set and things
exactly,
like that. We just
exactly.
made it, we used to use a BitTorrent thing to share it collectively. It was really a major hassle. So
Yeah.
finally, we put it on EGH storage, but that was also a major hassle. We spent months putting it on EGH storage, which is permanent. It has a GOI and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This data doesn't have any GOI, right? You can't cite it at the moment. Or do these data sets have GOI right now?
We put like citation information.
But no
In-
GOI at the moment, right?
No, they don't have GUI. So basically, when you want to cite the data, you actually cite the original paper they
Publication.
introduced. Yeah. We don't want to like add our own GUI on top of it. I think-
No, so data that has public licenses can be incorporated.
Okay.
Mhm. And if you record in the future, you should do it that way or talk to us,
It's cool.
get an MIT license. Mhm.
But why did you call it AxonFlow?
This is
It's
still
just a code name.
maybe
Okay.
a temporary name. We're still looking for the idea.
Misleading.
Yeah, it's-
Couldn't figure out a nicer name for it, but if you have one.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's what we have. I'm
yes.
happy to get any feedback.
If you're interested,
Sure.
yeah, send us
Yeah.
mail.
And how is this, is the grant paying for all this right now? Is there some grant that's paying all the cost of this development?
So right now it's like Code Whaling that's supporting it. The company Code Whaling,
Okay,
yeah, that's what is supporting it. There is no like,
it's a grant, it's a donation, basically.
Mhm.
kind of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, but thank you.
It could be an opportunity to fund this workshop.
Yeah, our hope is like maybe next year we can have this like as a platform for Telluride where you can, have people host their data, you record so much data from like the moving car with events or EEG and you can easily use it.
Yeah.
in something. So kind
Yeah,
of,
it looks really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.